So if you're holding money, if you put it in your bank account, it loses value.
Right.
If you take it out as cash, it gains a little bit of value, but it's less value than the one you put in.
Okay.
When you're
Welcome back to the 1% podcast, and this is the second episode. And in the studio today, I have Tawanda Kembo, the CEO and founder of Golix Private Limited. And Tawanda Kembo, welcome to the 1% podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm struggling to find a good angle to sit at so that the light is not in my face.
Is it too much?
Okay. Yeah, it's a little too direct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm guessing you told him to focus the light on me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the main focus.
But it's a tough balancing act because you also want to. I also want to be sitting in front of the camera.
It's a pleasure to have you on the 1% podcast. And actually, this is our second episode. So we just want to thank you for accepting to come through the podcast.
Hey, why couldn't I be first?
Yeah, I can feel that. So do you care to just introduce yourself? Who is Tawanda and what does Tawanda do?
So I think myself as an engineer. So I'm a fourth generation engineer. So fourth generation in the sense that my father runs a construction company, and that's what he's done his whole life.
Okay.
His business isn't the earth moving business. My grandfather also ran a construction company, and that's what he did his whole life, and so did his father. But unlike building roads like my father does, or building buildings like my grandfather did, I chose to build software. So I got my first computer when I was 13 years old in 1999.
Okay.
So I'm a guy who wasted 12 years of his life. And I've been building software ever since.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. So you also consider yourself an entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. And what motivated you to... I believe that you became an engineer because, of course, of your... how you obtained a laptop at the age of 13, you said.
Yeah.
So it's not something that is it something that you selected? Was it a choice to become an engineer?
I like to think that the craft chose me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So as an entrepreneur, what motivated you to then venture into entrepreneurship? Because I guess you could have been an employee at some, I don't know, Google or at Facebook or something like that.
So I would also want to think that entrepreneurship chose me. So I did work for a few companies.
Okay.
Along the way. I remember my first job out of college was with the telecoms company in the UK.
Okay.
I was a sysadmin there for about 2 years. So I think that is what kind of sparked my interest in things like security, Linux, building systems, keeping them secure. I left that to work for a health informatics company. I think we built the software that has been used by most of the hospitals in this country. So
really,
yeah, so kind of got exposure to building systems that can't fail. And then I worked for a couple other companies after that, but one thing I noticed was I couldn't keep a job. It's one thing which led me to entrepreneurship, so I'd keep getting fired.
Okay.
And I guess the second thing was when let's just fast forward to Golix. I think I ended up starting the company. I didn't want to start a cryptocurrency exchange when I started Golix.
Okay.
Initially, I was a Bitcoin evangelist. So this
Okay.
was back in 2012, 2013.
Okay.
Before Bitcoin was cool.
Wow.
And I remember everyone I would tell about Bitcoin would end up saying, okay, this Bitcoin thing you're talking about sounds exciting. How do I buy some?
All right.
And it used to be a very difficult question to answer back then. So I remember back in 2013, I started writing emails I wrote to every exchange on the planet at that time to say,
wow.
hey, you should consider setting up in Zimbabwe. Is there anything I could do to help you?
Okay.
None of them were interested.
Wow.
I ended up deciding to just solve the problem myself, and that's how I got here.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah. So how did you deal with that phase of rejection? At first, did you see it as? Did you have a moment where you were like, I should just leave this? Somebody will definitely do it.
I think in a way I kind of gave up. So stumbled into entrepreneurship by giving up on persisting and asking others to come and solve the problem.
Okay.
So I kind of gave up on asking and decided like no one was going to come and solve this problem. I was the only one that was left.
Okay, interesting. So I understand that there were a few challenges in Zimbabwe with cryptocurrencies, in particular Golix, which was the biggest exchange at the moment. Is there anything that people should look forward to from Golix? Do you look forward to reopening as an exchange?
So it wasn't a few challenges; it was many challenges from day one.
All right.
So it was a very difficult journey. I think the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest one was when the regulators took a very drastic stance on cryptocurrency and shut down our bank accounts.
Okay.
We are going to open again soon, so we haven't given up.
Okay.
But we kind of had to just slow down our operations and just go back to the drawing board and start again. So start again from scratch. So having meetings with regulators, banks, and like just making sure we tick all those boxes before we relaunch.
Okay.
So we have been quiet for a while. I think this is my first public interview in about 1.5 years. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because also there was a lot of outrage. I think late of 2019. There were a lot of publication. I think from one of the leading was it Taxim and other publications. They were talking about Golix and a lot. How did you deal with that? Because I think that was traumatizing for an individual.
It was. It was kind of a very difficult period because I was going through some stuff personally. So I was trying not to be in the public.
Okay.
And I think what was also kind of very frustrating was the journalists would take some aspects which are true, and then they'll make a mountain out of a molehill, and like blow it out of proportion. And it was a very difficult time as well, because at the time I was also in meetings with lots of banks, lots of regulators.
All right.
And there was a lot of stuff that was happening in the background that I couldn't speak publicly on.
Okay.
And so I tried to avoid it. But it ended up like getting out of control. I read some blog posts at the time that were claiming that like some were claiming that I was dead. There was a claiming
Really?
that I left the country, I fled the country. And like lots of people calling me to say, hey, how come I'm able to reach you and things like that.
Okay.
And so it seemed like it seemed every journalist would read about it, would turn it into another story and try to make it a bit more sensational than the last, and try to get eyeballs. I ended up releasing a public statement, and I kind of helped to calm things down. But it was it was a difficult kind of 2 weeks for me.
Wow.
At the time, I remember.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah. So speaking of cryptocurrency and blockchain also, what do you think is the future for Africa and also in Zimbabwe?
I think Africa is where the use case is. So when you look at other places in the world, cryptocurrency, blockchain is really a hammer looking for a nail. And if you look more carefully, you'd struggle to count on one hand people that are using the blockchain technology in production today.
Okay.
But cryptocurrency, the currency aspects, I think are the future of the technology. Particularly in Africa, because when you think about it, Africa is the hardest place in the world to do things like international payments, online payments, to get access to credit at good terms. And cryptocurrency kind of solves all these problems today.
Okay.
And so I think I would say Africa is the future, but if you look more carefully, Africa is the present. It is solving real problems today in this part of the world.
Okay, so you believe like most of the blockchain solutions do apply to Africa, and they should be implemented mainly in Africa.
I would shy away from using the term blockchain because I think blockchain is just hype. It's it's a technology which you can't really use in production in almost all the cases. I would focus on the currency aspects of the blockchain technology, so the money aspects. So using that technology as money is where it does solve problems today, where it can be used in production today.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, so globally, also governments have been taking a very slow approach to blockchain and cryptocurrency. And do you foresee a future one day where nobody will be using banks or fiat currencies?
I think of money very differently, and I think of policy differently, especially over the last year. That I've been doing a lot of work around policy. I now see it differently from I believe a lot of people. So I'll use an example to illustrate how I think of money.
Right.
If you had to take 2, 3, or 4 year old children and then to leave them playing, and then you had to give one of them bubble gum and you had to give the other one a bunch of lollipops.
Okay.
If you observe them for a while, you'll start to notice the one with lollipops will exchange bubble gum with the other one.
Okay.
And so when you think about it, those lollipops are money which is being used to buy bubble gum. So I think we'll always have lots of different forms of money. So if you had to go to Zimex Mall in Harare, you want to buy an iPhone there, you can buy an iPhone with an Android phone. So that Android phone is a form of money.
Okay.
When you do that swap and top, or if you had to go to a car sales and you've got a Toyota Corolla and you want to buy a Nissan Primera, that Toyota Corolla, when you do that swap and top, is a form of money.
Okay.
So I think we'll always have lots of forms of money, especially fiat currency, because governments will always have the power to say, you have to pay your taxes in this currency, and if you don't pay your taxes in this currency, we'll beat you up and we'll lock you up. And so fiat money is going to exist for a long time.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. So despite all the challenges that you've faced with the regulators and the government, are you now fostering a relationship with the regulators at the moment?
We've always had good relationship with regulators.
Okay.
But I also think of regulators differently. So when you think of firstly, when you think of the government, it's a broad term we use to make things simpler. But when you start to think about it, like, what's government? Is government the president of Zimbabwe?
Okay.
Is it the tax authority? Is it the central bank? Okay. Is it the Ministry of Finance? Is it the Securities Exchange Commission?
Okay.
Is it your city council? Is government you? So when you start to think about it, government is very broad, and when you talk about government, I now use the term we, because like I think as Zimbabweans, we are the government. And when you start to think along those lines, you start to see that you have a lot of influence when you start to think about things like policy. So when you think of government and you are using your index finger to point at someone else, you you also kind of lose a lot of power because you think you can't be part of the policy making process. You think you don't have influence. And so I kind of think of regulators in that way as well, and government in that way. So when I think of government and regulators, I kind of think of it as we, especially over the last year, I've come to look at it that way.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. So personally, I haven't seen a lot of innovation way after the existence of Golix. I haven't seen in Zimbabwe, particularly. And do you believe that there is lack of innovation right now in the fintech space in Zimbabwe?
Yeah, I think one thing is innovation is just so hard. It's very difficult. I'll tell you, like when we started Golix, we started Golix in December 2014. We had no bank account then. We launched our product around late February, early March 2015.
Okay.
We had no bank account still, so we'd use our personal accounts.
All right.
So somewhere around the 7th, after about 2 months, somewhere around the 7th or the 10th of the month, we'd start hitting the limits in our personal EcoCash wallets and personal. We would start getting calls from the banks like what are these transactions? It took us 8 months to actually get a company account.
Okay.
And so for the first year would only operate for the first couple of weeks of the month.
All right.
And then after that we didn't have any accounts to use to do transactions. So it was always a very difficult time, and you kind of need so it's easy to look back and and then think of Golix as a success story.
Okay.
And I think that's the problem we have as people. We like to think of history as a form of revisionist history. So we look at the successes, and because it's very difficult for someone who hasn't gone through a similar process to kind of visualize the challenges you have to go through to innovate. So I kind of think of innovation as a process. A process that where you have to wake up to overcome challenges every day.
Okay.
And even when people are saying you are now successful, so even when people were saying we're successful,
right.
we'd always have like a lot of fires that are burning, like hard drives that are crashing in servers. Like internet going out, like power cuts in the office. So would still have a lot of challenges, and so if you're an innovator, it's you kind of don't think of yourself as innovative.
Okay.
It's only those that are looking and thinking of it in with a revisionist history mentality that kind of think of that kind of think of companies as innovation. But I think it's not a lot of people. So what I also learned from the process is I don't think a lot of people will have what it takes to kind of stick it out and go through that process, because it's just so hard to do something new. It's just so hard to do something new, and it's so easy to make mistakes and get criticized.
Well, so personally, which African country do you think is developing or is the best right now in the fintech space? Or which country rather would you, if given an opportunity to have citizenship in, would you move to?
It's Zimbabwe. I think Zimbabwe has a lot going for it.
Okay.
Even though Zimbabwe does have its challenges.
Okay.
I've got a cousin who was here a couple of months ago, so he hadn't been to Zimbabwe for 5 years.
All right.
And then after a few days, he couldn't understand the way the money system works here. So if you're holding money, if you put it in your bank account, it loses value.
Right.
If you take it out as cash, it gains a little bit of value. But it's less value than the one you put in.
Okay.
When you're making a company, when you're making a payment to a company, you work in an office. They ask you, so which form of currency are you using to pay?
Okay.
Is it Zimbabwean dollar or is it USD?
Yes.
if you say USD, is your USD cash or is it an FCA? It's an FCA, is it in Zimbabwe or is it? And the reason why they ask these questions is all these different forms of money have different values depending on where they are.
Okay.
So when you think about innovation, I think that's innovation. Like a company that, when a company can accept like lots of different types of money, and they can find a way to retain the value no matter the money is in a bank. It's impossible to take it out if it's in a bank as cash. Even if it's outside the country, people do find a way to do that, and I think that's real innovation. So in terms of advancement, I think Zimbabwe is way ahead of any other country in the world, because Zimbabwe is a cashless society. It's probably the world's first cashless society.
but would we say it's cashless because of choice or it's because of circumstances? Because I think I would argue that we are using a cashless society. We are in a cashless society right now because of our economy. Yeah, and how our money has lost value and things like that, and it's faster to use things like EcoCash or Zipit and stuff like that. So, is it by choice or it's because of circumstances?
I like the words of Sinclair Skinner. I would say it's necessity is the mother of invention, but desperation is the father. So I think I think the problems we have here have caused people to think of solutions like EcoCash, like Bitcoin. I think we're really the first country where you've seen a large percentage of the population using Bitcoin to do actual payments and solve problems. Yeah. Okay.
Wow, which means in Zimbabwe there's a lot of opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So. And which technologies do you think, as Africa, we should be considering right now? We should be looking at. I would say the ones that are trending right now. Like when you speak of technology, there is artificial intelligence, there is blockchain, there is VR and stuff like that.
I would say all of them. So when you think with blockchain technology, so cryptocurrency is where our leaders should be focused on. When you think of augmented reality, I think we should be having that stuff in schools.
Okay.
It's, because if you've actually put on a VR headset and put on some 3D headphones, and then be able to immerse yourself in a certain culture in Nairobi, for example, in Kenya. It's a much better way to learn Swahili if you can immerse yourself in that culture and be able to smell how mboga smells like, or taste that ugali, or taste or feel the texture of ugali, and hear people speaking Swahili with their local accent. Like, that's a much easier way to learn Swahili for someone who's young, without having to go to Kenya. And then when you think of things like genetic engineering, I think does hold a lot of opportunity, particularly in Africa, where we're still a lot of our wealth is locked in things like land and minerals, and that's where our governments, that's where we as governments are investing a lot of our time and our money. But and I'll give an example. In places like Israel, they can 3D print meat. In places like the US, they've now started selling cow milk which is made in a lab, so cow-free milk. And so it no longer makes sense to use your land for cattle. You could actually build like factories with bio 3D printers which can make things like organs in places where healthcare is still very expensive and most people can't afford it. So I do think we can leverage a lot of these trending technologies to reduce costs, but creating actual value.
Yeah, but you do also understand that like our government does not even give, should I say, a budget that is like meaningful to their like ICT sector, and I think it will be a challenge, like for Zimbabwe to get to that point where we are thinking about the solutions that you're talking about right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't wait for government to solve these problems. I think these are business opportunities for for people like you and me.
Okay.
And these are things we can step in right now and start to solve problems. So government doesn't have money. It's the money they spend is your money when you pay taxes. So when you think about it, you are the ones that that are not producing a budget for ICT.
Okay.
And by not registering to go and vote for the policies you want to see, you are the one that's not like provisioning a bigger budget for ICT.
Wow. Okay, you're making me emotional right now, but yeah, I do accept that what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense, and out of interest, I would like to know if you were to meet the 13-year-old you, what would you tell him to do different?
Few things. It's a lot of stuff. Like those that come to mind, emulate the great. So find a good mentor.
Okay.
Don't get broke.
Okay.
Work hard. Believe in yourself.
All right.
Investing in yourself will pay you more money than investing in the stock market or in Bitcoin.
Really?
Believe in yourself. So, stay in school.
You believe in education?
Yeah, don't do drugs. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. Actually, what's your stance on education? Do you think like the old way of you have to go to school, you have to go to college? Do you think that still works now? In a world where the biggest FinTech or even the biggest technology companies are no longer looking at you like which school did you go to? Do you have a degree? Like Google, Facebook, all those companies, they're no longer looking at like your CV. So what's your take on education?
I think like most things in life, it depends.
Okay.
So I do know some people that have I do know a lot of people that have been able to escape poverty by going through education.
Okay.
But I also do know that the education system is very obsolete. Like it wasn't designed with us in mind.
All
so
right.
when we're colonized back in the late 19th century, it's like and the missionaries brought this education system, like it wasn't brought like it was brought to keep us in line, and like it wasn't designed with us in mind, and it's unfortunate it hasn't really changed over so many years.
True, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so before we wrap up, your advice to some young, because I believe you are a role model to a number of young people out there. What is your advice to them?
I would say one is don't get if you are looking to become an entrepreneur, don't get broke.
Okay.
Is one I would reiterate.
All right.
Yeah.
You should always be financially stable.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So pay yourself first. Learn to save, etc.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Tawanda.
It was a pleasure talking to you too.
It's very unfortunate it had to be short, because I know there is a lot of stuff we could have talked about. But thank you for coming through, and we hope to have you again in the studio.
But looking forward to that too.
That's great. So this is the 1% podcast, and I was talking to Tawanda Kembo from Golix, the CEO actually and founder of Golix.com. And don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast. And from the 1% podcast team, until next time.